It's Inappropriate Characters.
Hello, everyone. This is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords, and I'm coming to you live alongside with Grim Jim and Venture Satanis. And tonight we have a very special OSR guest star with us, who is the Evil DM. And he kept his identity a secret until now. I hope that those of you who come in to see who we got are going to be happy with that. So let's get right to introducing Vince, the Evil DM. Vince, tell us a bit about yourself. I know that you've been involved in the OSR for quite some time. You've actually won an Emmy Award for what that's worth. You've produced a game or two. You've been very active as a moderator in some of the important social media groups related to the OSR. So correct me if I'm wrong about any of that, and tell us more. Tell us what you want the audience to know about you.
Well, I've been involved with the OSR as far as back as, 2008, 2007. More vocal in 2008, 2009 when I started doing podcasting for Roll for Initiative, which is the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons first edition podcast, where I got together with Jason Elliott and we made that podcast. From there, I branched out and made Thaco's Hammer, Save or Die. So I was trying to cover all bases for OSR, getting the games out there so people can play them and get an opinion about these games that were considered old, dead games. And from there, I did write Mazes and Perils as a free clone hat tip to Holmes RPG, which, like you said, for what it's worth, won an Emmy Award in 2013 for Best Free RPG voted by the OSR. And right now, I'm doing my own OSR, my own YouTube channel right now, the Evil DM, which you can find here. I'm just going over 1E stuff and talking about Marvel superheroes and DC superhero games.
I'm going to go and subscribe to your channel right now.
Yeah, I think everyone should. You should also subscribe to the RPG Pundit, of course. But first of all, I want to say that we've already got a comment here. Brian Harris says, props to the BCMI on the shelf in your background. I know also, besides what you've already mentioned, you've been writing for the Bleeding Fool website, not to be confused with the Bleeding Cool website. Do you want to explain to the audience watching and that will be watching after this is done streaming, just what Bleeding Fool is and what you're writing for them about?
Bleeding Fool, the best way to think it's like Bleeding Cool, except it's more right-leaning and more satirical.
And it doesn't lie as much, I assume.
No, we basically take the facts and we tell the truth with, our point of view, obviously. Everything's going to be slanted no matter what. No matter what you do, it's always going to be slanted to the person writing the article. At least with Bleeding Fool, it's slanted to more serious, not, type shit that the left do all the time. I've been writing the
RPG. These political articles that are more right-leaning?
Well, they're not really political articles. They're more based on RPG and comics. I've been doing RPG side of it, along with some comic reviews, but mostly RPG reviews.
Okay. And you just released a new article. Was it today or yesterday?
Officially, it went up, I think, today. Okay.
And can you give us the gist of what it was about?
The basic gist of that article was gaming is a hobby, not a sport to watch. As the title implies, it's mostly me complaining about people that just sit around and watch the game and don't participate in the game. And the game is not really a community. It's a hobby that you invest time in, you experience, and you learn. And by sitting there watching you pundit play, okay, great, I can watch you play for hours. And yeah, I can experience the game with you, but it's through your experience, not through my own experience. And I'm just trying to get people to just get up off their ass and roll the dice with us instead of sitting there just watching.
I think I saw some crazy guy doing some YouTube videos that said similar things, about there not being a D&D community. And in fact, there's a D&D hobby, and the D&D hobby is defined by people actually playing D&D.
I don't know who that crazy guy is.
I fell asleep until you mentioned porn, and then I woke up and I'm like, what?
It's been interesting, though, how the sudden dominance of streaming has created these kind of expectations and performance anxiety in a lot of people in their home groups, because they seem to think that their gaming should be the same as people who are professional actors and all the rest of it. It's
what they call the Mercer effect.
Yeah, the Mercer. Us gaming are the most accepting people in the world. I mean, all of us here have been playing since probably the 80s and earlier, and we knew how it was to play back then, getting the shit beat out of you if you were like a nerdy, geeky type kid, or you were the fat kid playing D&D. You got the shit beat out of you, or you got made fun of. What's that nerd book over there, you dork? So when we found other people to play the game, we were like, hey, dude, we don't care what you are. Just come here, roll some dice. We're all the same people. I mean, there were plenty of people that I met along the way that were like bully people. Once they found that I played D&D, they were like, what? Oh, that game's cool, man. And I had a bully sitting next to me in one game back in high school. So,
that's an interesting thing to say. I don't know if the experience is the same for people outside of North America. Maybe Grim Jim can tell us about his youthful experiences playing RPGs, if indeed he started when he was young.
Oh, yeah, I was 8 or 9.
Right. But in my experience, that was something that never really happened to me, right? Like, I know it happened to other people, but it kind of leads me to think, well, okay, is it because they were playing D&D, or is it because they were already, they were kind of social misfits, right? Like, I came in right at the tail end. I started playing RPGs right at the tail end of the D&D being a fad in the 80s, right? And in that time, there was a whole bunch of people are playing D&D, and it wasn't just nerds, right? It was area. Like, my first group was basically in junior high, and it was a bunch of like kind of heavy metal kids that would all go on to very shortly after that become stoners, right? And me, right? And I kind of liked heavy metal, but I wasn't really into heavy metal. But I liked hanging out with them. And in that group at that time, I would say I was the nerdiest kid on that table. In fact, the reason that my first experience with Dungeons and Dragons was as a DM was because this other kid had bought the Menser Red Box basic set, and he couldn't understand it. And they said, well, let's get the RPG funded to run it because he's the smartest kid at our table, right? So like, I was kind of the nerd of that group, right? But within a few years later, that had kind of changed. And very quickly from then until like quite a bit later, until university, and really until, kind of late in my university period, it was pretty consistent that at any table, I was the least nerdy kid at the table, right? And everybody around me was more socially dysfunctional than I was, right? But, I wonder how much of it, because I think that there's this problem too, that there's the narrative that the other side has is this argument that, the problem is these are all these socially dysfunctional geeks that are, upset because we're coming into their space and taking the game away from them, right? And I mean, that's not right, because I'm perfectly happy with playing D&D with anyone, who wants to play D&D. And I don't have any kind of nerd test for that, right? Like, I mean, I don't care if you're also really into Star Trek or something like that, or if you don't give a crap about Star Trek, or if you read comics or you don't read any comics. What I care about is that you actually want to play D&D, and you're not trying to make it something else, right? So sometimes I think this whole argument about how, we were bullied for playing D&D, it kind of doesn't apply. I don't think it's entirely the right argument to be making, right? I mean, I know there were a couple of times in junior high and in high school where I could say I was bullied, right? I think that we make a bit too much of bullying these days, but when I was bullied, it was never because I played D&D, right? It was for some other reason, probably because, when you're a kid, you're still learning how to socially interact with other people, right? And some people learn and some people never actually learn, sometimes through no fault of their own, or sometimes because they choose not to, right? And I mean, some of the people coming in now were bullied probably as kids for totally different reasons, and they might have evolved past that, and some of them might not have, and have just happened to be part of groups that you're now forbidden to bully, right? You're still allowed to bully nerds, right? You're not allowed to bully, say, I don't know, LGBT people, right? But yeah, I don't know. I might have just gone off into a tangent here, but
a bit.
I think that we shouldn't try to present this idea that we don't want the normies playing D&D, right? I want as many people. If D&D was a game that everybody wanted to play, I'd be perfectly happy with that. What I don't want is for people to come in and consider themselves consumers of D&D who never actually play, and then try to set policy for D&D, the hobby, by claiming some fictitious D&D community, right? And that to me is the real problem. I don't know what the
community. Then, I guess you could be like kicked out of it. And I don't think anyone here wants to be deplatformed enough where somehow you couldn't get a game, or you couldn't like talk about your own gaming experiences, or you're just shunned on the internet, which is for a lot of people their total social outlet. So yeah, if they create a community and see it as a community, then you have the potential of being outside that gate, that gated community, and left on your own. And I think that's one of the reasons that people, some people here don't want to see it as a community, or don't want that perception to take over what gaming is for us.
Right. Well, virtually every reference I've ever seen on social media to the D&D community has been in a post where they're trying to exclude someone from that community, usually ironically by claiming that someone is being a gatekeeper, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's happened dozens of times to me, and I know you too.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen someone use that phrase for anything other than that? No.
Vince, if you want to say anything, you have to learn to cut in over Pundit, because he will just go and go.
That's true.
So did you have any thoughts?
My own voice.
No, I was with the recent set of articles that I had out. And Pundit saw it, people slamming gatekeeper at me, and most people come to my defense saying, "How is he a gatekeeper by just saying you're a fan because you just watch?" I'm not gatekeeping. All I'm doing is saying, "Hey, you're a fan. Why don't you come over to this side of the table and roll the dice with us? You want to watch? Fine. You're not a gamer. You're a fan. That's all you are."
By the way, you should all check out Bleeding Fool and check out Vince's latest article, because it was quite well written. Very good stuff. It's interesting. I think that there's two different forces that are at work here. One of which has been around for a long time, which is that the industry of RPGs would always love to be able to have the RPG business expand beyond people who actually play, because that would expand their customer base, right? And I was just in a little mini Twitter spat with someone who was talking about how wonderful Dragonlance was, right? And I was saying, well, Dragonlance was really the earliest example of an RPG company trying to push the idea of products being mainly for non-gamers, right? And it was kind of the start of the problem. It was the start of the end. It was basically the beginning of the end for old school, the old school period, right? It was the death of kind of that sword and sorcery in favor of this, faux Tolkien stuff that was much more Baudelarized. But it was also when suddenly it became, viable for RPG companies to focus products like stuff like novels, obviously, but even gaming products that were more like fluff material that was meant for people to read, who were not necessarily ever going to use it to play, right? So that was one side of it. And then the other side of it that is a much more recent thing is that you have the SJWs who are taking advantage of this idea of a community of passive consumers to claim to speak for them in order to remove their ideological enemies from the hobby. And there's this kind of unholy alliance between those corporate and SJW forces, right?
And they have the temerity to call people like you gatekeepers. It's a bit weird. I don't quite know where this allergy to the term community has come from exactly, because a community can be just people who have a shared interest. So if you're interested in role-playing games, you are part of the role-playing community, but not necessarily part of the hobby. And if that's all that defines the community, that's fine. If you're into the games, if you like to play the games, if you're a fan of the material, whatever it might be, that's okay. But when they try to start assigning the very particular ideological stances or whatever to that community, taking it and defining it beyond being into the material or playing the game. That's where we seem to run into these issues, because they're trying to redefine what the gaming community is, from people who game and are into the material to people who game and are into the material and participate in these lifestyle brand choices the same way Gillette has been positioning themselves on just recently. That to me is where the break is.
SJWs have weaponized the term community. They've used Foucaultian postmodernism to kind of own that word and then use it as a weapon against others, which is why there's a problem, right? And which is why I try to, the way to fight back is to create a different set of semantic weapons. And so I argue for the use of the term hobby over the term community, because a hobby is a collection of people who do something in common, which requires that then you have to do that something in common to be part of it. And it's something that has no specific moral value that they can ascribe to it to then claim to be the moral guardians of it, right? So
so it's a semantic shift towards activity and doing something rather than just passively being part of it.
Active participation.
Yeah.
I wonder if hobbyists will soon become like an insult, that those people will mob people like ourselves. Like, oh, you're not part of the community. You're just a hobbyist.
Don't give them ideas.
Are you filthy hobbyist?
It could be.
Maybe. I don't know.
So another subject related to our guest tonight, you had a little something to pimp here tonight, Vince. You did an RPG, Mazes and Perils, right? And you did originally the very earliest version of it was kind of a free OSR RPG, and then you did a more professional one, and now you're doing a Kickstarter for is it a new edition of it? Is that right?
Second edition of it. It's more mainstream, cut down on the rules, make it quicker gameplay. I'm also play testing it with my group right now as an actual play podcast, which you could find on iTunes, World of Arcanus. We're doing the first set of episodes. We were playing 5e, and then we got sick of it. I'm like, you know what? Let's play test what we're doing now for 2e for Mazes and Perils, which later on this year we'll have the Kickstarter out for it. But right now we're play testing, and these guys have a chance to actually mold the game as we're playing and add feedback. And if people who listen write in and be like, hey, I think it's a good idea if you did this or that, I would obviously incorporate it into the game based on what fans say. So always willing to listen. That's what makes the game fun.
Cool. And can you tell us how Mazes and Perils differs? Because I have to admit, I haven't actually seen the game yet. Can you tell us how it differs? First of all, how Mazes and Perils as it exists right now differs from other OSR games. Like, is it just directly a clone? Does it have something special to it? And also what you expect. I get that you haven't completely finished creating the new edition. You're going through playtesting, but how you expect the new version of Mazes and Perils to differ from the previous one.
Well, the one that's right now deluxe, it basically is a mix between Homes and First Edition, along with my created basic house rules into the game to make it, I guess, a mixture of the two and allow people to do different things compared to 1E. It's not as strict as 1E and is not as loose as Homes. It's the best way I could describe it. People who play it are very familiar with the rules. When they see it, they're like, oh, this is pretty easy to pick up. We've had a lot of people play test the deluxe edition, and they were like, easily picking it up. Because if you're a fan of Homes or you're a fan of 1E, a fan of even 2E, you'd be like, oh, I know how to play this. Now, as far as the newer one, the second edition is concerned, the rules are cut down to, you have a standard way when you hit, you roll D20 and you would add your bonuses and such. But we just made the combat a little bit quicker by having everybody have an assigned damage rate and weapons having an assigned damage bonus, just to make things go a little more smooth going forward with the game. That was based on a lot of feedback we got. And people wanted it more heading towards mainstream games, but still have the OSR feel to it. That's what we went with, the new Mazes and Perils.
Are you taking any inspiration from any new school material, like 5th edition stuff or something like that?
Yeah, we did borrow a few things from 5e, like some of the rest rules, and advantage and disadvantage was definitely incorporated into the edition as well.
That's good.
It's funny. The advantage disadvantage thing is such a small thing. It's surprising that it hadn't occurred to anyone before. I think, but it is really effective.
Well,
I agree. It's a game changer.
It's really like. Sorry, go ahead, Benjamin.
It is kind of a game changer, and I know I'm not alone. I think it's the best. It's probably the single best thing about 5th edition. Like if I ever go back to old school games, which I do all the time, periodically, that's probably the one thing from 5th edition that I would keep over anything else and incorporate into, basic D&D or really anything else that had sort of D20 mechanic like D&D. I would keep advantage and disadvantage. It doesn't matter if I was playing Swords and Wizardry or Labyrinth Lord or DCC. I would keep advantage and disadvantage like 99 times out of 100 because it's revolutionary, really.
It is a really good mechanic. When I was consulting for 5th edition, when I got on board, I didn't invent advantage and disadvantage. It was already they'd already come up with it, but they were still at a stage where they hadn't really decided everything that they were going to do with it or not, right? And at that point, it was being used in a very limited sense, and there was still a lot of stuff where they were using like flat bonuses and penalties, and it was kind of a jumble of both. And at one point, they were talking about only using advantage and not having disadvantage, and there was a lot of kind of uncertainty about it, right? And one of the things I really emphasized with Mike Merles in our conversations was that this is the killer app. This is the most significant thing you've got in these new rules, and it's what's going to define these new rules. And what you need to do is just apply it across the board, right? Don't be afraid to do that, right? Because it simplifies everything. And you got to dare to simplify, because that was the big problem with 3rd and 4th edition. Well, 4th edition had a ton of other problems, but that's another story. But it is the thing that is going to define this game and make it more successful than the other editions, right? And after that, they I guess they took my advice on that one, because they applied it pretty much universally. And I think it's one thing that almost everyone agrees with was a really good innovation, right? Curiously, I haven't really used it in the material, the OSR stuff I've written after being on 5th edition, but I do think it's a really good set of rules, and it is something that certainly you can integrate into OSR material for especially if you want games to be like simple and fast moving. It's a really, really great mechanic.
Vincent, with your game, is there a thematic hook as well as the rules changes? So like Pundit's got medieval authentic. If you look at Lamentations of the Flame Princess, it's more of a horror aesthetic. Is there a particular narrative or thematic hook to it?
Well, when I wrote the original one, it was just a generic open world thing. And then when I moved into Deluxe, it kind of became like a Frozen North's Conan type thing going on when we wrote the modules for it. So I think we were sticking with that whole theme, the Iberian type thing going on. I'm not sure.
More swords and sorcery is what you're saying.
Yeah, more sword and sorcery, correct.
Mm-hmm. All right. So other than that, another thing that you're known for, Vince, is that you were one of I guess you were the primary, assistant moderator of the old Google Plus OSR group, which was a hugely influential group among OSR designers and bloggers and all of those sorts of people. People who are watching that might not have used Google Plus may not realize that G Plus for most of its existence, it's almost, they're about to shut down now, that site, but it was a kind of a big center for people who were hardcore RPG fans, right? And RPG writers and RPG bloggers and all that sort of stuff. And especially for the OSR. And then basically after the events that happened with James Raggy daring to have his picture taken with the greatest Canadian intellectual of our time, and after that with an SJW who happened to have made a popular OSR logo, declaring that he'll sue anyone who uses it. The owner, Joseph Block, the owner of the OSR group, decided to shut it down, and he moved to MeWe, where there's a new group there that's also doing quite well. So it disappeared. And the first people that jumped in and said, well, we're going to make our own OSR group on Google Plus were a group of SJWs who created a G Plus group they called the Honorable OSR, honorable. And they declared that you could only enter it if you passed the kind of political purity review by their moderators. And so they joined it, and you went on it, which initially caused me a considerable amount of concern as to exactly where you stood with things, right?
Well, they invited me to this group. They said, here, we're starting a new group since you guys are shutting down. Please join it. And they sent an invitation. So I joined it. I'm like, well, maybe I can go over there and, patch things up, maybe talk to them about it and just close that whole thing down and bring them back. Because Joe at the time was keeping it open for the time being. But, it didn't work out that way, as you know. Continue.
My perspective on why they invited you is because they know, I know Joe Block, and I'm sure they know that Joe Block is quite conservative. I think he's also fairly socially conservative and everything. And maybe they didn't know as much about you. And they said, well, if they got you on there, it would give them the appearance of continuity with the old OSR group, right? I kind of criticized you about that. Later, when I spoke to certain people and then I talked to you, I realized I was wrong. I said as much in my YouTube channel that I had misjudged you. And so at that time, Venger actually came up with a term that I then completely took to myself and retroactively invented. It's called the Inglorious OSR. And I started a rival group on G Plus called the Inglorious OSR, where anyone can join. We put no political purity litmus test for membership. And you joined. So I'm very glad that you did. And the funny thing is that at the time, they had quite a head start on us. They had, at the time that I created the Inglorious OSR group, the Honorable OSR group had 179 members on it. And I had one when I created it, obviously. And now they have still 179 members, and the Inglorious OSR is up to 175 members. So if you're watching this, we need 5 more members. So please, if you haven't joined up yet, go on Google Plus. Even if you don't go to Google anymore, go to Google Plus, join the Inglorious OSR, so we can get over the top and finish off these bastards, right? And show them, where the real OSR, what the real OSR thinks of political purity tests.
Evil must triumph.
I mentioned that to you like a couple days ago, or maybe a week ago. I was like, I noticed something about it. They hovered at 100 for the longest time, then they got up to like 100, and you said 79 it was, or something, whatever. And then you slowly just tick, just cut that away until you were pretty much dead even with them, and they never increased as you just kept up and ticking up on those numbers.
Yeah, we've been getting about 5 new members a day, more or less. So we're doing quite well. And now you told me something very interesting that we're going to expose today. Is that you said that you've told me, and I don't know if you wanted to talk about this. I guess you knew what was coming. that there's like a secret group of the Honorable OSR, leadership. Their internal, I don't know what they'd call it. Their Soviet Comintern or whatever the hell they are. That where they secretly get together and do their planification or whatever. And that you found out about this. So where did you hear about this?
I noticed mentioned of it inside of their group about talking about something in a private group, and I'm like, So I just did a general OSR search, and some of the results were hilarious. I also found something that was called the Super Honorable OSR, which I guess was basically a spoof of their group.
Okay.
It only had 1 member in it. I've never heard of the guy, but I just figured he made it up just to spoof on them.
Good on him.
Yeah, and then I saw this one with like this like evil overlord puppet master with hands like this, and said it was a private group. I'm like, what's this? So I guess they're meeting in secret. I don't know.
I'm gonna be very curious to find out if after your guest appearance tonight you're gonna get kicked out of. You're no longer gonna be considered honorable.
Well, I'm not making fun of them. I'm just stating the facts. That's all.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see how much of this they're willing to take from you.
I'm reporting the facts live as I find them. That's my job.
Yeah.
It's so silly. Gaming should bring us together, regardless what we have against each other.
I agree. As long as you want to game, you're welcome at my table. Let's change to a more serious subject, which has something to do with a very important kind of public service, I guess you could say, that Grim Jim does. And it's called the Zellart Scholarship. And you've been doing this for quite a few years now, right, Jim?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how many. quite a while now. Yeah.
Would you like to tell the audience about it again?
So, for several years, I worked with a young American artist who went by the name Dark Zell online, and working for me basically helped him through school and college to an extent, and through working for me, he got a lot of exposure. I know people joke about exposure, but he did, and he got more work from that. Unfortunately, he was killed while he was in South Korea teaching English. He was just hit by a bus crossing the street out of nowhere, which was a huge shock to everyone. And I tried to think of a way that I could commemorate him and just do something nice. And one thing I've really liked about being an independent publisher is that I get to nurture new talent, because new talent is all I can afford most of the time, right? And it does really help people. You know, it gives them confidence, gives them work, gives them money, helps raise their profile, and so on. But just doing it through work wasn't necessarily that I didn't think the best way to go about it, because that was dribs and drabs and not much money to make a big difference. So I instituted a scholarship, and all of the stock art that Zell did for me, I sell, and the money raised from that goes into it. Some people donate art, which is very kind of them, and that gets sold as stock art, and the money from that goes into the pot. And I try and raise about $500 each year to also go into the pot. And then I take that accumulated money and I throw open the gates and say, hey, you know, send me your art. If it's really good, I like it. You win, in essence. You get the pot, and we publish that stock art for other people to use, put your name out there, expose you to other publishers and so on. So, you know, you've got enough ramen to put you through a year at college or whatever. And you get some opportunities out of it. So, yeah, we're in the last 24 hours or so of this year's fundraiser. We're about $42 short. It's on Indiegogo. If you just search for Zellart Scholarship 2018, you should find it. 2018, 2019.
So it's a very noble charitable cause. It's not political in any sense. I believe you had said that your candidates, you prefer candidates that have financial difficulty, and I think that's the only condition, right? That they're artists.
Yeah. It's primarily meant for students, so genre artists who are going through college or whatever, because it can be especially difficult for kids who are into fantasy and science fiction and so on to get through art school, because they tend to be quite disparaging towards fantasy art and so on. So that's who it's focused on. But in the past, grants have gone to trans artists. They've gone to homeless artists who, you know, are sleeping on someone's couch somewhere and they submit art via their laptop or even through their phone, things like that. So primarily students, but if you're hard up, you can apply. And the more money I raise, the more goes out to people, I might, if we go over the target, there might be smaller rewards to second and third sort of tiers as well. It's amazing how a relatively small sum of money can make a big difference to someone in one of those situations.
Right. So this is on Indiegogo. It's the Zell Art Scholarship. That's ZELART. Look it up. It's got 30 hours left from what I see here, and it's a little bit short of its $500 goal right now. I would urge everyone to back it. And if you can back it, great. And if you can't back it, or if you can, you should also, I think, try to share this page with people to see if we can't raise more money for it. So get it out there on social media.
And to help get people to enter as well as raising the money, getting people to enter is also quite a struggle. So if you know artists in any situation like that, let them know. It's got to be worth a punt. By
please share that. This is a completely charitable cause. We're doing this through a surprising amount of altruism for a bunch of guys like us who are mostly about self-promoting, especially. But please go and share it at least, and if you can, add a couple of dollars to it so that we can get it over the top, because it really is a very good cause. And unless anyone's got anything else to say about that subject, no. I have some breaking news, if not. The breaking news is one of our chat people, Brian Harris, has just told me that the Inglorious OSR has just hit 179 members, you guys. We did it. The Inglorious Army has triumphed. So again, that doesn't mean we have to stop here. So if you're listening to this, whether now or later on after we're done being live, go to Google+, look for the Inglorious OSR and join it to express your allegiance to the Inglorious OSR bastards. I also have some other news I was going to comment. I'm going to let Venger pimp his newest product in a second here, but I thought I should mention, because we're going to talk a bit more about politics later on, but by that time, Venger will probably have his bedtime, so we don't know if he'll be involved. But today, this very day, is the second anniversary of the inauguration of President Donald Trump. So this is our Donald Trump themed Inappropriate Characters show in honor of the second year of his 8 years of president. And I had a bet once with Venger that whether or not Trump was going to win re-election at the time that Venger was still a dedicated Democrat and a fiery Hillary voter. I would like to present another wager to everyone watching that after 2 more years of this bullshit, I bet you anything Venger's going to vote to re-elect Trump. I don't know if you have a rebuttal, Venger.
Well, we live in interesting times, so it is possible. It is possible. I mean, because now, not only am I dealing with, because Pundit was right. I voted for Hillary in the election, and I was against Trump for many, many reasons. But now, 2 years later, I find myself kind of like thrown out by the more radicalized left. So I was always kind of in the middle, left-leaning, but now I'm kind of right-leaning. And now Trump has this whole, underdog thing going on. It's like everywhere you go, people hate him. And they, are so vocal about it. And so, and I don't mean to minimize their distress or disdain, but it just piles on and it piles on, and eventually I just feel sorry for it. I mean,
it's very British of you.
Yeah, I don't care who it is. I don't want to. I'm thinking of a name, and I'm not going to say that name, but if he was in Trump's position, I would even feel sorry for him. which is ludicrous. But there's something in me that I'm kind of rooting for Trump in a way, not only because he is the president and I don't want to see my country fail, but we can all empathize with being underdog at one point or another in our lives, and I'm at that point now where he just takes so much heat from all sides, like constantly. Like he can't even like walk down the street with like people shouting and screaming and tearing out their hair. Like, look at the way he's walking. I hate that guy. But it's like, whoa, settle the fuck down. Maybe he's just walking down the street and you're making a lot of shit about nothing. I don't know. Anyway,
I think it's important that I point out at this point that I am still a raging lefty, and I have no sympathy for the Kraft cheese golem in office. So,
Grim, if you were American, Grim, would you have voted for Hillary?
if I was American, I think I'd shoot myself.
All right. So, given that you are the only person here who voted for Hillary and would have voted for Hillary if you were, among those of us who are not Americans, I have a real question for you here. When you think back to 2016, before Trump won, if you were to have imagined what the Trump presidency would have been like in the first 2 years, would it have been anything like what it actually was?
Oh, well, can he not hear now?
Yeah. That was for you.
I thought you were talking about. I thought you said non-American. I thought you were talking about Grim.
No, I was talking about you. You're the only one who voted for Hillary, right? So back 2 years ago, when you imagined what the first 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency, what you thought it would have been like, would it have been anything like what you thought Trump actually has accomplished as a president?
Even a broken clock gets the time right twice a day. So I knew he'd probably get a few things in his favor or, do a good job with. But I knew that a lot was just up to chance, and there's a lot he could fuck up. I thought there was a good chance we could be like in a nuclear conflict with North Korea and maybe other countries.
Except he's made peace with North Korea.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, supposedly. I mean, and I don't know our relationship with Russia. I mean, it's sanctions here and sanctions there and sanctions everywhere. I don't know what it's going to lead to. I don't know if it's going to lead to any kind of conflict or more cyber war or more Cold War or
Well, if anything, they accuse Trump of being too friendly with Russia.
I know, but that's eventually that's going to bite us in the ass. But I haven't heard much about Russia. For the first 3 or 4 months after he was elected, I would watch MSNBC and I'd be like, okay, is he gonna be impeached now? It's been 10 minutes, because you keep watching coverage, and that's what they keep talking about. They're still talking about it every single day. What's Mueller up to? What's Mueller doing today? And what he's talking to, and who's been involved now? And who's being questioned by the FBI. It's all everything. And MSNBC is just a lead up to when is Trump going to be impeached? Everything for I don't know if you guys saw every day for 2 years. Yeah. So after 3 months of that, I stopped watching because I'm like, it's not going to happen. Not in the next couple months. They make it sound like, oh, any day now. Oh, maybe in the next couple hours, we're going to get news that he's going to be impeached.
Well, you know that BuzzFeed.
I don't know if it's ever going to happen. I don't know. He's a slippery motherfucker. So,
well, look, could it be that there's just nothing there? Because BuzzFeed did an article this week where they claimed that they had secret proof, they had leaks and stuff from the Mueller investigation that had, Mueller had absolute proof of Donald Trump's collusion and all this stuff. And the Mueller investigation, which has kept itself very, very quiet for, in part, that's kind of professionalism. I'm not going to completely criticize that. I could criticize a lot of other stuff about their investigation, but it's actually proper that they keep things quiet. They had to come out and make a statement saying that basically everything BuzzFeed said is bullshit, right? And this was after CNN reported on it for 27 hours about how, this is it, we've got him, blah, blah, blah. Right. It's absolute proof. And once again, Wah, wah. They got screwed.
I mean, I heard that Congress was like going to seriously take political action based on this BuzzFeed article. That now, yeah, they came out and said, well, that's probably bullshit. So
when you're writing politics for games, you always imagine these kind of Machiavellian schemers and brilliant investigators and everything. And it turns out it's more like drunken, half-naked clowns running through a cactus patch.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I watched this. You might have seen it, Grim. I don't know about the rest of you. I don't know if it even aired anywhere in the U.S. But there was this film that came out around the beginning of the month. It was called Brexit: An Uncivil War, and it had what's his name? Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah,
Cumberbatch acting as Dennis Cummings was the architect of the Leave campaign in Brexit, right? And it was done by, obviously by people who were anti-Brexit and had certain anti-Brexit bias. But it actually, they actually ended up having to be kind of honest in pointing out, first of all, just how out of it and how incompetent the Remain campaign was, and also just how absolutely clueless the entire political establishment was. Right? These guys were not, I think they're malevolent, but they're certainly not competent. Right? Like they're absolute nincompoops, and that applied also to both sides, right? Like the guys who were the Eurosceptic politicians. One of the reasons that the Brexit campaign won was that this guy Cummings basically told them all to go, sod off. That they didn't know what they were doing, and he just did his own thing, right?
What did they used to say about British soldiers? It was said about, but I think it applies to the country as a whole. It's lions led by donkeys. Is the phrase, I think. The officer class, the ruling class, they most of them come from this very insular private school, Eton kind of well-off bubble, kind of raised on the leftover fumes from empire. There was a good article, I can't remember what it was in, but about this phenomenon and how this incompetence of the British ruling class goes back to India and before.
It's the same thing with the oligarchs in the U.S., right? Like the establishment ruling class in the United States are a bunch of people who think they should run all of our lives and who are really just absolutely unqualified to run anything.
Yeah. No, anyway. It is good source if you read back on British history. It's good source material for games and sort of incompetent leaders and things like that. So it's well worth digging into. And if you can't be bothered with that, watch Blackadder the Third.
All right.
You know what? I actually started watching Blackadder again just today. I was watching Blackadder the Fourth, actually, the first and second episode of that series.
Great series.
Like every couple of years, I try to go back and watch that. And I try to make it a tradition. My kids kind of hate it at first until we start watching it, but the Blackadder Christmas Carol, I pull that out every year. Oh, maybe you know about this, Grim. This year, I got out my DVD of, we would say Bernard, but Bernard, I guess, and the Genie. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's like a British, probably from the early to mid 90s, like Christmas movie. It's kind of a comedy, kind of silly.
It rings a vague bell, but I can't remember it.
Yeah.
In our chat, Mr. Tellum. In our chat, Mr. Tellum says Lord Flashheart will be missed. Woof.
Yeah.
All right, so let's change back to an RPG related topic, because I know that in a few minutes here, Venger's wife is going to make him leave. So
my camera is sinking, so I keep going like.
That's usually my problem. That's weird. You're working on this Kickstarter for a new OSR product, finally. And maybe you want to tell me.
I didn't do before was OSR, because it was.
Alpha Blue wasn't.
Maybe fourth wave.
So tell us about it, to pimp it before you leave.
It's called Chalt, and Yeah, this thing sucks. Here, I'm just gonna try to hold it.
My goodness.
So yeah, CHA apostrophe, of course, ALT, Chalt.
There's always got to be a goddamn apostrophe in there.
That's right. 14 days to go, 195 backers, $7,108 pledged of the 10,000 goal. So it's going pretty good, and we'll get there. It's a lot of things in one. It's a campaign setting, it's a mega dungeon, and it's a hex crawl. So it's everything you would need for like a year or 2 years of regular campaigning in Chalt, the world. It's post-apocalyptic, it's eldritch, so it's Lovecraftian, it's Gonzo because it's Venger. It's science fantasy because I love chocolate with my peanut butter. Yeah, it's cool. I've been working on it slowly over the last few months. I did this recently. I blogged about it too. This map.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been doing my own stuff. Trying to get back in. I haven't really made my own maps in like years. Like trying to make them actually good, not just like quickly scribbling something on a hex because the players are in front of me and I just want to, get something seen.
Well, the other great hex crawl you did was the Islands of Purple Haunted Putrescence, which I think was an incredibly good OSR product. A lot of people in the OSR think Carcosa was really good, and I always thought it was just garbage. And it's that opinion was just made more confirmed in my mind when I read the Island of Purple Haunted Putrescence, which was a much more creative, much more interesting hex crawl for that exact same kind of genre than Carcosa was. So I recommend people take a look at that, and certainly if your new product is going to actually be OSR and it's going to have a similar sort of vibe,
It will.
It's probably going to be something to really look for.
Yes, it's going to be a pretty cool, I think, blend of old school D&D and 5th edition. It's going to be a nice marriage of both. And I just put up something, actually. I put little bits of content, Chalt and other things on draconicmagazine.com, which is like another blogish kind of site. And one thing that kind of ties into some other stuff, the newest or latest article on Draconic Magazine is Kingdom of Gillette. And that's, of course, JA''A''Lette. And I encourage you to go read that, everybody. It's about the matriarchy and what happens to males, humanoid males in Gillette. It's castration. I'm just going to say it. It's castrated. Well, 90% of them do. The other 10% are left over for breeding purposes and fighting in the gladiatorial arena. But, so you can expect little, pop cultural things. I don't just get angry about stuff and rant about it on Twitter. I twist it a little bit, and I put it in my games.
Well, this is pretty much where you and I differ, because I'm obviously very politically active on Twitter and other social media sites and on my blog and everything else, right? But if you look at all my RPG products, right, like Lion and Dragon says nothing about Donald Trump. It says nothing about SJW. It says nothing about modern politics at all, right? None of my games actually do anything that sounds remotely topical. They're still countercultural in the sense that they're very, traditionalist, right? Like Lion and Dragon is set in the actual Middle Ages, and as everyone knows, the Middle Ages are triggering, right? And if, like I've always said, if I do another big source book for Lion and Dragon, it's going to be on the Crusades, and that's just going to be hilarious, right? But you, Venger, have never met a social controversy that you haven't wanted to put into one of your products.
Yeah, I mean, my imagination incorporates a lot of stuff that it just comes in, and I feel like I want to do something about it. It's on my mind. I try to get my mind to like pour things out because, like Pundit, I'm fairly prolific. I can come up with an adventure or what have you in like a couple months. I mean, he's been doing gangbusters with his OSR series, Pundit Presents. But I've come up with 45, something like that, titles, products, whatever, on Drive-Thru RPG in the last 5 years. So I'm no slouch either. And I just gotta like crank it out, not in a assembly line kind of way where it's like generic. I just don't give a shit because I do care about everything I put out and what goes into it. But I got to draw from somewhere. And that's one of the things I draw from is pop culture, what I deal with on a daily basis. And I twist it into like a fantasy or a sci-fi or a comedic kind of way and I just put it right out there, just right back in people's faces. It's kind of a social service.
Do you work in it?
And help people deal with the confounding stupid bullshit that we all deal with on a daily basis.
Vince, you're a special guest tonight, Vince. Do you have any opinion on Venger's creative exhibitionism?
No, I don't. You did a wonderful job on the article. I saw that up when it posted, and I'm like, oh boy, he's really going for it with that. I wanted to break it down.
Do you work out any of your demons in the work that you do?
Actually, no, I really don't. I try not to include things into the games that I write as clever as you guys probably are doing right now, but I generally just stick being, neutral and not worrying about that stuff. I don't want to include it in my game, and nothing against you for including it in yours. By all means, go for it. I just don't feel the need to do it. That's all.
Yeah, I tend to do mini games that work it out for me when I find something particularly funny, usually. So I did Privilege Check, which is basically a formalized version of the Oppression Olympics as a card game. So
now, I have no problem blogging about it. As you see at bleedingfool.com, I'll call people out for it. I don't really care. But as far as printed product, no, I won't do that.
Yeah.
So Venger, and to a lesser extent, Jim, do you guys worry at all that, like 5 years from now, someone will look at something in one of the products you wrote, this year or last year and say, what the hell is he talking about? Because like some of these things I think are very contemporary, right? And I wonder if in 5 or 10 years, if people who weren't there at the time will even, get what you mean. Like it might be like if you did if you put a reference in some RPG product in the 80s saying, where's the beef, and like everyone's like, what the hell does that mean today?
Well, my professional career really started with the Munchkin's Guide to Power Gaming, and there's a couple of oblique references to the Spice Girls in that, and the editor was worried that would no longer be relevant, in the years to come, and here they are doing a comeback tour, so I win.
There you go. Let's
I agree.
Let's all hope that 10 years from now, the SJWs aren't making a comeback tour.
Yes, let's hope so. But in some ways, it's kind of a time capsule, which I think is kind of cool. Because, some reference, I made a reference, I think it might have been in Gamma Turquoise to like the whole Al Franken mini scandal. And probably like 2 or 3 months after it came out, I'm sure 90% of the people reading it did not pick up on it at all because, once it was out of the news cycle for a couple of weeks, it's like, who remembers that shit or who gives a crap? So it's kind of a time capsule. It's like something that very few people will know about, and the rest, it'll just completely go over their heads. And then, like Jim was saying, some things will stick there and they'll stand out, and it'll be something that even 20 years from now, people will be like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was like a real thing.
All right. So getting to my other political subject of the day, which I don't know if we can actually make it have any relation to the RPG world, but coinciding almost like as a little anniversary present to Donald Trump, today or yesterday, there was a poll made by infamous right-wing news site NPR and PBS. So, National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting Service, for those of you who aren't in the U.S., those are pretty much the most leftist sources you could imagine. And they did a poll of Hispanic and Latino citizens in the United States, and support for Donald Trump among Hispanics and Latinos has now hit 50%.
Yeah.
So this is a jump of 19% from 2016, and it means that now that's a huge level of support among Latinos and Hispanics, which relates to something I've been saying since forever, which is that actually this idea that Latinos like myself, right, are hugely supportive of illegal immigration is not actually true. I think that there's this is a very divisive subject in the Latino community, and part of it is for some very clear reasons, right? Which is that as much as anyone else might be worried about illegal immigration, the reality is that people who are Latinos understand immediately what are the problems related to illegal immigration. And in Latino communities in the United States, there's the added fact that the first place that is affected by illegal immigration and everything that it brings with it, including the drug cartels and human trafficking, will hit Latino communities first and foremost, right? That those are the most affected communities by these problems, right? And never mind that there's a whole bunch of Latinos, including myself, who have gone through the process of immigrating to another country legally. My parents did the same thing. They immigrated to another country legally. My grandparents were refugees, again, legally. And there's definitely a perception in the Latino community that the left constantly tries to pretend is not there, that this is the right way to do things, and that it demeans the efforts of people who have come into a country legally, who want to contribute to that country, who believe in the rule of law, to try to pretend that the entire Latino community favors uncontrolled illegal immigration. So this was my little surprise statistic for you guys tonight, that it emphasizes the fact that 2 years in, Donald Trump, I think his support among white non-Latino voters has pretty much stayed the same as it was, but his support among Black voters and Hispanic voters has actually gone up, which is very, very bad news for the Democrats, because a whole bunch of their game is trying to get the votes of those communities, right? Even at the time of Trump's election, if you look at the places where non-white voters voted for Trump, a lot of cases, those numbers were exactly what made the difference in certain key states, in certain key locations, that essentially won Trump the election, right? If Trump had done as badly with Black voters as, say, Mitt Romney had done, he probably wouldn't have been president. So I wanted to point that out tonight to viewers, both for those viewers on the right that might think that Hispanic is just some kind of monolithic bloc that are going to unquestionably vote Democrat. And also, of course, for our leftist viewers who are probably coming in here to see what terrible things we're saying. Yeah. Who are under the impression that, Donald Trump's support comes only from, this white base that the leftist media constantly pushes. I don't know if you guys have anything to say about that, but I thought it was tremendously interesting and very funny that it came out from a completely left-wing polling source right on the anniversary of the first half of Donald Trump's first term as president.
Well, you were asking how we can channel that back into gaming in some way, and I'd say the lesson there is that no community is completely homogenous, and there are different factors working on them in different ways, so they can act unpredictably.
That's an excellent point. It means that anytime some asshole claims to speak for an entire community, never mind if there's somebody who wasn't part of that particular group they're representing, even if they are, that in fact they're not really speaking for everybody in that group.
Do you think Catholicism plays part of a role in? Okay.
Do you have to leave us, Benjer?
I gotta go. Great show, guys.
All right, see you later.
See you, Evil DM.
See you later, man.
More of you coming up. Good stuff.
Thanks.
See you later.
Venture, thanks for being with us. I want to take advantage of this moment to remind you all that if you want Venture to be able to stay past his bedtime, please support us. We are still on Patreon. As soon as Jordan Peterson completes his better version of Patreon for free speech, we'll probably. I'm certainly going to try to get the other guys to move there. But for the moment, where you can support us on Patreon, and be sure to do that, because the more support we get, the more shows we're going to make, and the longer Venger will be allowed to stay up at night.
Yes, to be able to show his wife the receipts that he's not just wasting his time.
I can tell you definitely from living in Texas that the majority of the Latino community down here absolutely despises Trump. Maybe a small percentage does not. But I can tell you, speaking to them and the ones that I can understand, obviously that don't speak English, excuse me, voice is going here, but they are all for legal immigration, and they do not like people that sneak over and get around the system, and they absolutely do not like that. So they're speaking out of their ass on the left. I can tell you that from a Texas point of view.
Can I ask you something? Do you speak Spanish?
Not at all.
Okay, so do you hang out a lot with Latino communities?
I have, yeah, I do have a lot of friends that are Mexican, and friends that some of them don't really speak a lot of English. They'll speak broken English. So, and I have people that gaming some of my groups that are Latino. Some of them are, they speak about Trump once in a while. They absolutely don't like him at all, but they will say that they want people that come over here, like their families, legally follow the system, not come over the wall, under the wall, whatever the fuck they do to get over here.
Well, I can tell you one thing, Vince, which is that within Hispanic communities, there's a lot of times a lot of social pressure coming from certain parts of those Hispanic communities. That means that it's probably very similar to if you're like a white guy living in New York or in Seattle or something like that, where there are a lot of Latinos who actually do like Trump, but will never say so in public, because doing so will raise up a whole ton of problems for them, right? Like there's going to be a whole group of very radical people within that community that will go after them for it, right? So I'm not questioning your personal experience about this, but I would bet that there's probably, even in Texas, quite a lot of people who, in the Latino community in Texas, who are probably, people that will say, they'll keep quiet, or maybe even, give, token statements about, I don't know, Trump's bad or whatever. And then at the actual polling booth might end up doing something different, right?
Yeah, we all do that. We don't want other people to know, especially this day and age. You don't want to walk around with your Make America Great Again hat, because you'll get taken away and the shit beat out of you unless you're walking around with a gun in your pocket at this point. This is the only way you're going to protect yourself. So,
I was going to ask then, because you guys just had, the midterm elections there, and you had the very funny situation in Texas where you had a guy, Robert the Mick O'Rourke, a completely 100% Irish white guy going around pretending to be a Latino to try to get Latino voters, right? And campaigning against the evil white supremacy of Ted Cruz, an actual Latino, and I just couldn't believe that. And I really have to wonder, I don't know, I didn't get, I'm Latino, but I'm not in Texas. I've never actually been in the Latino community in Texas. I don't know what the reaction there is, but that to me, I just can't imagine how that would have looked like utter absolute pandering and just something absolutely disgusting, right? Like he's less Latino than Elizabeth Warren is Native American. Like he's not Latino at all, but he insists that everyone call him Beto so that he can pretend that he's part of that community.
So Beto actually came from El Paso, where he comes from. That was his. I know a few people that grew up with him and helped him with his campaign. So I had them explain to me where this Beto thing came from. And apparently the Beto thing is a nickname he got growing up with the community. He was involved in the community, gave back, he helped, what a normal person would do. So they nicknamed him Beto. I don't know if it comes from a short from Roberto.
Yeah, it's short for it's short of Roberto, right? So
yeah, that's what I'm thinking it came from. So that's where he is. But he never actually claimed he was that. He just went, when someone said it, he was just like, oh, okay. One of those things. Let them acknowledge it. I'm just not going to agree.
But if he identifies as a Hispanic, who are you to gainsay him?
True.
Well, no, he was smarter. I'll give him that. He was smarter than Elizabeth Warren for sure. He was certainly smarter than Talcum X, Sean King. But and that he didn't try to pretend to literally fake it. Right. He just made sure everyone saw him as Beto in a voting area that was full of Hispanics, right, and hoped that people wouldn't realize.
The thing was that they nicknamed him Beto. He wanted to be called Beto. Fine, you could be called that. And then people were complaining he should be called Robert, O'Rourke, wherever. And their argument was, well, then Ted Cruz should be called Rafael because that was his real name. The difference between Ted Cruz and him was Beto was a nickname given by people. It wasn't official. It was just a nickname. Ted changed his name from Rafael to Ted. So that was their whole stupid argument they kept giving back at people here.
Yeah. Well, they were accusing him of not being a real Latino, right? Which is something that happens similar to in Black communities. You hear, people who are Black conservatives being accused of not really being Black, even if they're 100% Black, right? And I've had some people suggest that I'm not a real Latino, right? And this is it's funny to me, but yeah, I mean, it's still just the irony of that. And then he campaigned as like the young, the hip young guy when he's actually pretty much the same age as Ted Cruz is. Like they're I think Beto is 44 and Robert the Mick is 44 and Ted Cruz is 46. Like they're the same goddamn age,
He just played the younger card really well. Came on, wore like the jeans and the sneakers. Came riding on the stage on the skateboard. Did those little videos of him doing things. Trying to relate to the young, cool crowd. But if you ask any one of those supporters of Beto what he stood for, none of them can really tell you anything except he's cool, man.
Yeah. It's the kind of the same, tactic Obama used in, what is he say? Oh, hope and change. And, he's, whatever. But, thank God, I'll say this. Thank God Ted Cruz didn't try to do that. Right? Like, really, that would have been just horrible. One thing I like about Cruz is that he has no illusions about just how, utterly uncharismatic he is. He's somewhat of a Nixonian politician in that sense, right? That he's like, I'm a blobfish and I'm proud of it. I don't care, but this is what I'm going to do, right? So you got to, to a certain extent, even if you don't like Cruz, you got to at least, thank the Lord that he isn't trying to go around on a skateboard or doing something humiliating like that.
God, that was ridiculous. Yeah, and especially the ad that Beto put up when he had the cold sore lip. It was just the most disgusting ad. I was like, take 5 minutes, go to your makeup people for the $70 billion that you raked in that you wouldn't share with the rest of the Democratic Party all of a sudden. And put some makeup on, cover up the sore spots. You're doing a national ad. Please cover up a little bit.
In the UK, you kind of end up seeing the opposite phenomenon where you have like, I saw this article, I forget what the town was now, but the other day there was like this gang of guys, that were all, obviously they were all, I don't know from where exactly, but they were basically, they were Muslim and they had assaulted someone somewhere and, all the media said was, 9 guys from wherever, did this, right? Like as if they were, like they were Cockneys or something, like there's absolute effort to hide the ethnicity of people engaging in bad behavior.
And it ends up being counterproductive to do that because people inevitably find out and then you look like you're up to something by covering up. I can appreciate and understand why they do that because they're worried about community relations and stoking hatred or whatever. But when it inevitably comes out, it's worse than if they'd just been upfront about it in the first place because it lends fuel to the fire of conspiracy theories and whatever else. So
yeah, absolutely. Hackney. They were from Hackney.
Oh well, yeah, that
9 lads
explains it.
from Hackney that brutally beat someone, right? Oh, just some good old boys from Hackney.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be uncommon. At least not last time I was in Hackney. It was a few years ago, but still a bit of a rough area.
Anyway, so yeah, that was my major point. Anyways, was that it's very stunning, and it's a very bad sign for the Democrats in the United States. A very good sign for the next 6 years of Trump's presidency, that he has now got apparently 50% approval rating among Hispanics. And it's important, I think, to me, it's important to say this, not just to piss off the SJWs, but also to, I'm sure some people will accuse me now of being, some kind of a secret leftist cock for saying it or something. But this idea that, because there's a lot of people that say, no, but you can win over, the Hispanic vote. And then there's some people that say, no, you can't, right? Those guys are always going to vote Democrat, and that's just the way it is. And if you think so otherwise, then you're some kind of a neocon cock from the, from the National Review or something like that. But there is a certain point there that there are many ways to appeal with a Republican message to a number of minority groups who have actually been terribly ill-served by the Democrats. Like just horribly ill-served, right? Like just like the epidemic of broken families is in Black communities is to a large part due to Democrats at the federal level and at the level of city government. The epidemics of drug trafficking and human trafficking in Latino communities are due to this to this leftist narrative that says you have to let absolutely everyone in. All right, I think I've killed the conversation there. So, any other topics for tonight, guys?
I have a new website and store. So it's primarily for my stuff. It's post-mort.com. But given the creeping censorship and so on going on in places like RPG Now and so on, I'm hoping to be able to provide a home for not really edgy content, but just stuff that might run afoul. I'm sure Venger's got some things he'd like me to sell for him, and I intend to undercut the percentage that RPG Now and that take. So yeah, check it out, bookmark it, buy my stuff from there, and if you make something that's a little bit naughty or impolitic, then get in touch, and I might be able to sell it for you.
You should put the link in the description after the live stream.
I will do tomorrow after the stream's processed.
We've got a question for you here from the chat, Grim, from Brian Harris. He says, Grim, did you coin the term munchkin, and was it co-opted by Steve Jackson Games, or how did that come about?
Right. There was, this is the days before social media, of course, but there was a popular email being passed around and posted on forums and things of different kinds of gamer, like the real man, the weirdo, and the munchkin. And that term munchkin just seemed to kind of explode out from there, and we took it and ran from it. Steve Jackson didn't co-opt it. We proposed a whole bunch of different ideas to them. Me and my friend were trying to sort of start up our own company at the time, and we thought getting some freelance experience would be helpful. So we sent out a bunch of ideas to basically every gaming company we could find with an email address. And Steve Jackson took us up on the Munchkin's Guide, which we'd only put in kind of as a joke anyway in the first place. And now look. So, not that I see any money from all of that, which is a sore point, which I bring up every time Munchkin comes up.
So you're like the guy that founded McDonald's, and then Steve Jackson Game came along and took the name from you. Yeah, all the card games and everything. I mean, the first couple of sets, they were like within a tiny sliver of having to pay us royalties, but yeah, didn't happen. I guess I should be happy that something I did was
went on to become this kind of phenomenon, but not having the money does sting.
Yeah, really, I imagine.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else? Anyone have anything else they want to promote?
No.
Any idea when your Kickstarter's going to be up and running, Vince?
I'm not sure exactly because I'm not handling it. It's being handled by Gallant Knight Games. They said second quarter of 2019. So whenever that exactly is.
But you'll let people know via your social media or your websites?
Yeah, I would make an announcement on YouTube, on my Twitter, the Evil DM, also probably on my blog, theevildm.com. So yeah, we'd let everybody know. Definitely.
Yeah, if you send me the links, whatever, to all your stuff after the show, I'll put it in the description and stuff for people so they can find it.
Okay, great. I will do that.
Since I haven't pimped anything yet, I'll just mention that my RPG Pundit Presents series of PDF supplements is continuing to come out at a rate of about one a week. And this week, I've come out with RPG Pundit Presents number 63, Miscellaneous Medieval Authentic Spells. And this is a list of 20 ritual magic spells that are all based on actual folk magic rituals from the real, Middle Ages and early Renaissance. They're very weird because magic at that time was very weird. And so they're all stuff that you can use. I mean, obviously you can use them with Lion and Dragon, but they're really usable with any OSR game or any D&D variant type of game. And they include all kinds of very strange little rituals that can kind of, add some flavor to your magic users, or maybe even your non-magic users, or your witches, or whatever you might have in the game. Among the list of these, there includes a ritual that involves cheese to prove if someone is a thief or not. A ritual involving a bat to summon a fast-moving horse. A ritual involving a magic charm to make someone pregnant. A ritual with a crystal that allows you to win debates at a noble court. A ritual with a toad that allows you to swiftly cross a river. A ritual with a snake that will allow you to kill someone who has broken an oath from a distance. And, like many, many more. So that's just one of several medieval authentic magic supplements that are part of the RPG Pundit Presents series, all of which can really be used in any OSR game, and that added touch of medieval authenticity to your magic systems or your setting. So there you go. Check it out. Check out all that series of the RPG Pundit Presents. Sometime in the next few months, I hope we're going to come out with the anthology, which will be of the first half of last year's products, not the first half chronologically, but half of last year's products, which were all the ones that dealt with the medieval authentic material, like the medieval authentic adventures, magic stuff, and stuff like that. It will not include this one I just mentioned because this is already the New Year cycle. So eventually we'll do some other compilation, but that might not be for quite a while. It's because it's full of really interesting stuff that isn't just for my specific games, but can be used in any OSR game, D&D game, or with a little bit of modification, pretty much anybody's fantasy campaign.
Yeah, that is the good thing about the OSR. Everything's pretty much plug and play with a bit of fiddling and beating with hammers.
That makes it so successful, I think.
Yeah. I think we're done. So hopefully we'll be back sometime next month.
Sooner if people support us on Patreon.
Of course.
Send us your Patreon dollars and we'll ramp up to 2 shows a month.
Send your firstborn and 2 untraceable blood diamonds to our P.O. box, and we'll see what we can do. Right.
All right, guys. I want to really thank the Evil DM for joining us tonight. And hopefully we'll be getting some more. You're only our second guest here. You were beaten out by Joe Bittman. But you're the second one in our series, but hopefully we'll have some more guests coming up. We haven't been very good at looking for or inviting people to join, but if you're an OSR personality, you want to pimp your games, then be sure to let us know. Talk to us on social media, and if you're sufficiently well known, we'll invite you on.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Currently smoking a Lorenzetti A plus image Lataki.
Bye bye.